listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, hosted by Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, where he features successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, and you're listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, where I feature successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. This episode is brought to you by Esq.Marketing. We help law firms generate more clients and cases using search marketing. And speaking of successful lawyers, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brian Zeiger. Brian is the founder of the Zeiger firm and specializes in criminal defense and civil rights litigation. He's a trial lawyer through and through, in the trenches every day, fighting aggressively to get justice for his clients. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for participating. And we've had a lot of different attorneys on the show, some criminal defense, but I don't think anyone's been as involved in trial litigation as you. I mean, I know a lot of attorneys do that, but you seem to really relish that.
Yeah, when I get a case and I meet the people, instantly from the minute I meet with them, I start thinking about what we're going to do at trial. I appreciate that a lot of things don't go to trial, but I prep and think about cases as if I have to try it from the very beginning, both with criminal and with civil rights. I've probably done approximately about 120 jury trials as lead counsel, and so I'm constantly thinking, well, we might have to try this one. So let's prep it like we're gonna.
Chance favors the prepared, right?
Yeah.
So Brian, take me back to the beginning when you started your firm. What was that like?
Well, at that time there were three of us, and we rented this really, really tiny office in a very middle of the road kind of building, and we were able to, sort of get started there. And about, we had almost no cases. And then about maybe 9 months later, there was a tenant next door to us or down the hall that moved out. And we sort of made a deal with the landlord to take over that space as is. And that was kind of a mess as well. But that was like a real office. So we were able to have a real office set up at that spot.
And were you guys doing the same types of cases back then? Criminal defense, civil litigation?
Back then, we were basically focused on criminal defense.
Okay.
We were basically focused on criminal defense, and we did a lot of criminal cases. Of course, when you're on your own like that at the beginning, you're hungry.
Definitely.
And, you're lean. And so you're doing what you can do in order to overcome that hunger and no longer be lean. And use your time in order to attempt to justify your living, and doing that to your family and your spouse and your friends and all that. So other cases do come in, but we attempted to hone our skills on criminal defense. Yes.
Gotcha. And so like when you're starting that off and it's the three of you and you're looking for cases, was it a referral network or were you doing your own marketing, or how were you, what was the plan to generate business?
So it's a really interesting question. So at my age, I am on the cusp of people who grew up with and embraced computers.
Me too.
In childhood, and people who did not embrace and use computers in childhood. I remember in, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, getting a home computer. I remember having a computer in a classroom at school in maybe fifth grade. I remember those things. I remember working, earlier in life, where everyone did not have a computer on their desk, right? And then I remember earlier in work where everyone had a computer on their desk and there were no longer shared computers. So I remember daisy wheel printers.
That's a new one for me.
I remember the sound of the daisy wheel printer, and I remember tearing the dotted sides off the sides of the paper. I remember having a laser printer at home. It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was.
When at-home color printers came out and not getting one because a laser printer was a better thing to present at work or school. And I say that to you because when we started, there was a thing called the Yellow Pages. that was a thing, especially for personal injury lawyers in the Philadelphia area. And there was a thing inside the Yellow Pages called a double truck. That was when you opened the book, if you will, if someone had an ad that ran the entire page from left to right across the entire page, that was called a double truck. They had the entire opening, and that was somehow some symbol of success, I guess, in the community, was that, well, they have a double truck, so they therefore must be a real law firm, and or that there was sort of the back cover of the Yellow Pages, or on the front there was like a magnet that they stuck onto the front of the Yellow Pages. And these things were all sort of a very big deal, and you could only get in once a year because they only published the Yellow Pages one time a year. So we started right, I believe, when that form of advertising was falling off a cliff and people started using the Yellow Pages for like coasters.
Mine was a doorstop. So
yes, exactly. So we were on the border for that, and so at the same time we were of the age of, well, it seems like we should be using the internet to advertise instead of the Yellow Pages. This is wrong. So we did both, more so in the Yellow Pages, and that took about 2 or 3 years to get out of our system. And then we dove into the deep end on internet advertising. Gotcha.
Yeah, I remember all that stuff too. You know, I had a very basic computer in the home growing up, and it wasn't until in my teen years when, you know, we had, you know, the dial-up AOL, you know, you got the disc in the mail, and it wasn't really prevalent in my life either. And then now, I mean, they're everywhere, right? I mean, people have supercomputers in their pockets, and it doesn't seem like you can do anything, you know, get a job or do a job without a computer. So it's amazing how far it's come. Another question I had for you was about the trial work itself. So I was reading on your website, and is trial work something that all attorneys have to get into, or is that just something that you kind of consciously chose?
I get a very small amount of lawyers that actually go to trial.
Okay.
So I think there is a much larger group that have tried cases. I think there's a distinction between people that have tried a couple jury trials in their career, right? And people who actually, their focus is on trying cases. I don't think it's the same thing. I think there are many lawyers, for example, who maybe have done, you know, 8 to 10 jury trials as either second chair or lead counsel, and they're prepping all their cases like they're going to go to trial. But I think that's different than having tried the amount of cases I've tried. Maybe I did not answer your question then.
No, it's fine. I had a cousin once who was a prosecutor in another state, and that was one thing she didn't enjoy about the job, was being in trial. And I was wondering, like, how, you know, does an attorney have to get really good at that in order to run a successful practice?
I think that there's two prerequisites for being a trial lawyer. I think you have to sort of naturally enjoy public speaking and being quick on your feet and having a sense of humility about yourself, like self-humility. And then I think the second part is that knowing that, you know, self-acknowledging that you have the first part and that you're interested in doing this. The second part is you have to work on it. You have to hone your craft, right? You constantly have to work on it. So no matter, you know, everyone who does a lot of trial work is naturally a good public speaker, in my opinion. I very rarely find people that try a ton of cases that are terrible public speakers.
It seems like there's an air of salesmanship to it as well.
I guess, but you know, so those people, then you have to take it and go sort of to the next level and really hone your skills. So, you know, I think that's those two things need to be there.
Okay. What's Brian, what's one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome in growing your law firm? So you started off in the beginning and you're trying to get cases, you're hungry. When did you kind of notice a tipping point and, you know, I got to do this to get, you know, grow the business?
It's really hard to say. So we're in Philadelphia County is where our office is, and we serve, you know, anywhere in Pennsylvania that people want us to go, and you know, federal court, state court. And in Philadelphia County, there are a lot of other lawyers.
Yeah.
So I think, and a lot of good lawyers who I like and I respect and I'm friends with, and being friendly with them, you know, I think the biggest struggle is that if I were somewhere much smaller than this community, I think I would be far more prevalent. I've thought that all the time. So I think that's the biggest struggle in growing the firm, being in Philadelphia County, is that you really have to do even better than your best. You have to set yourself apart. Like a story about there was a championship game where LeBron James in the first half was having just this spectacular first half. And at halftime, apparently, like an all-world first half, like a career first half, but the Cavs were not winning. They weren't there. The Cavaliers weren't winning, and apparently Tyrone Lue in halftime called him out and said, you know, you're doing a horrible job, and you know, the team was like, what? This is our leader. He's having a career night. And Lou said, it's just not good enough. You have to do better than your best. And so I think that resonates with me, in that being in Philadelphia County, I think that there's so many great criminal defense attorneys here that you have to do better than your best. You have to remember that speech, and you have to try to elevate your game and realize, you know, where you are and what you're trying to do with your practice. I think that's the hardest part of growth.
That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, yeah, sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper when you think you're doing great. And it's always hard to hear, right? If you feel like you're working as hard as you can, and then someone says you got to do it better. Yeah, totally. I agree. Brian, what's a piece of software or a tool that you use daily in your practice that has kind of been a game changer for you? Is there something that like improves the efficiency of your practice or helps you work better?
I would say Google Voice.
Okay. That's a new one.
Probably the best tool now today, currently. I would say WordPress, maybe 10 years ago. Okay. Was the best one. The reason for that is, so I grew up in a very middle-class area. And the feedback I heard from my neighbors and the community and the people where I lived who dealt with lawyers was that the lawyer never called them back.
Okay. I hear that a lot too.
And so I, from the time we opened, make sure that before I went to sleep at night, I returned to every phone call that I received, or I returned every email that I received from everyone. Because I remember growing up, there were no lawyers I knew, there were no one I grew up with was an attorney, and I heard that constantly from folks in the neighborhood. So I make sure, or do the best I can to call everyone back. And what Google Voice allows me to do now is to give everyone my cell phone number and have it on my computer screen in a separate window, or have a separate monitor set up next to my computer just with Google Voice, and have it's on my business card, and have all my clients feel free to text me, call me, contact me for any reason they want 24 hours a day, and be able to immediately type a response back.
And you could just do it on the computer.
Right, immediately. I don't have to take my cell phone out. I don't have to use those tiny buttons with old man fingers. I don't have to do any of that. Right? I can sit down, right? I type very fast, and I sit there and I can just type immediate responses to clients. And I think that being in constant communication with clients and their families is such an overwhelming thing. And to be able to streamline that process and do it so much more efficiently, I would say that by far Google Voice is the best platform for that. Now, years ago, I would say it was WordPress. And the reason for that is because I have no problem, again, as we discussed earlier, engaging in the computer stuff that we have to do, right? And what WordPress did for me years ago, not anymore, was give me the ability to go on and quickly create content for a page, quickly blog, quickly check some SEO stats, very quickly, very user-friendly, very hands-on. And also when I was purchasing SEO or PPC services, I was so well educated in what was going on that I knew when I was getting Shinola from the other side that I was able to say, you actually have no idea what you're talking about. You're just a salesperson. You're not actually an SEO or a PPC guy or gal. So Thank you, but I'm not interested in your product. So WordPress allowed me to be super educated in, what's going on.
That's cool to hear you say that. Yeah, they have tons of documentation online. And it's neat how embedded they are in the SEO community. I mean, there's so many plugins for WordPress. There's so many blog posts about how to use plugins effectively, and not just from WordPress. Like, it's a whole developer community, a whole marketing community that are publishing this content that is super helpful. I mean, what I do is not hard by any means, and there's so much information on the internet to go out and learn how to do it. And even, if you don't have the time to do it, to learn a little bit about it, like you said yourself, so when you're getting taken for a ride. I had one question that has been bugging me. So you do a lot of civil rights litigation. How is what's going on in the world right now impacted your practice? Have you been seeing a lot more case volume because of all the, the social unrest and things going on in the world?
I think it's really hard to say. I think it's really a tough thing to answer. I think that in life, I always think about a pendulum that swings, and it sort of makes, like a figure eight or like a circle, and it keeps going back and forth. And there's ebb and flow in life. And we as people try to find center, to find calm and peace in meditation for ourselves. But that it's very difficult to answer your question, because I think that now I would imagine we would have a slow time in civil right in new business.
Sure.
We would have a slow time in new business, because I would think that if I worked in law enforcement, I would be super sensitive. I would be hypersensitive to these issues.
Yeah.
And so I would be much more cautious in using force than perhaps I had previously been in my career.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, I would think that perhaps there's more going on out there, and so it might require police to be somewhat more hands-on than they had been previously, because there's more civil unrest. Third, I would think that the certain areas of law enforcement would have a far greater need and request for body cams and dash cams, even though we've really seen that come on in the last 5 years or so. I think that now there would be sort of a request to say, look, we're just doing our job, and, let's mount up with this technology to show everyone what we do at work. And so once they have the body cam on, I would think that then we might swing back the other way to where we were before all this started, with just all of these sort of random events that wind up being cases.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to say. Think about it like when you do SEO for Google, based on Google, right? You're doing a site, and the SEO you're doing is 100% geared towards Google organic, okay? You're not considering any other stuff. But then Google changes their algorithm, right? So there's this constant sort of flow or change in thinking as to the core terms of relevancy and how Google will judge that and put you number one on the top of their page. So again, it's just like a figure eight or a circle where there's just a pendulum swinging, and like that, in society we have changes as well. Yeah,
that's a great answer. And a good analogy too. Yeah, I've always wondered how social undercurrents like that affect business at different law firms, and I know that was relevant to you. So,
a lot of the cases we do, and we've discussed this with you, are sort of halfway between medical malpractice and medical deprivation cases at prisons or community correction centers. So those cases are not affected by
right. Yeah.
In my opinion. And so, we've signed up 2 of those very recently. So I don't think there's any effect on those based on what your question was. So again, it's case by case.
Gotcha. So on your website, Brian, you talk about one piece of advice that you'd give to clients when they get arrested or when they're detained or whatever, and it was to keep your mouth shut. What is a piece of advice you'd give to attorneys starting off a law firm? Like they're thinking about going off on their own. What would be one thing you tell them before they go start doing that?
The two pieces of advice, but they are counter to each other. Okay. The first piece of advice would be to keep your costs as low as possible. Right? So, maybe rent space from someone else as opposed to your own space. Right? Rent an office in someone else's office first. Don't spend a lot of money on office furniture. Don't hire an assistant. Don't spend a lot of money on things. Try to keep your monthly costs down, because the first 6 to 18 months, you might not have a lot of cash flow coming in, right? So if your costs are low, you can sort of tread water, okay? On the other hand, the second piece of advice is, if you're going to advertise, we talk about the P's of marketing. I always talk about the P's: product, placement, people, promotion, price, okay? Those are the 5 basic P's that I analyze in marketing. So when someone comes to me and they say, will you buy this product from me? I do an analysis of all 5 of those P's and see where it is. How does the end user get to my ad? The promotion. Anyway, on advertising, I believe that after you do your 5P analysis for whatever product it is that you're going to purchase, at that point you must jump into the deep end. So with advertising, if you go into the shallow end of the pool and you put your foot in like up to your ankle, you might as well not spend that money, because in my experience, you don't get anything out of that kind of spend. You need to go on the diving board and dive in head first to the 9 foot and spend a lot of money and crush that medium with your advertising in order to get a return on your money. So the advice is not the same. The first piece of advice is, don't spend any money, do it as cheap as you can. And the second piece of advice is, if you're going to do paid advertising, do it. Don't test the waters, because you're wasting your money. I can't tell you how many people I see they want to get a website. It's like, that doesn't work. They want to have a sign on a bus. That doesn't work. None of that works. You can't do any of that stuff. You have to do an entire full force 9 foot deep end advertising campaign.
That's great advice. And you're right. Yeah. If you just dabble in here and there and you don't fully commit, then you'll see lackluster results. I've seen that a lot too.
Right.
You've been listening to Brian Zeiger, founder at the Zeiger Firm. Brian, where can people go to learn more about your law firm?
Well, because I'm your client, they can go to Google or any search engine and they'll see me come up, hopefully on the top of the fold on the first page.
Yes, they will.
Thanks for listening to the ESQ Marketing Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.